All right, welcome everyone. Hopefully the audio's good and you guys can see and hear me. And I hope you guys are having a good Sunday so far. I did change the bit stream or whatever that is, bit rate for the stream. So let me know if it starts crashing or something and I'll have to change the settings. But good to see everyone. We've got Xavier in here. We've got Joe the Stickman Medea, Red Octane. We've got Bobby Lasers. I submitted my beat an hour ago. My inner monk wasn't pleased with the vocals I chose. I did see your submission, so you are on the wheel, as you can see. I'm interested to hear your guys' takes on this assignment because we've talked about this a lot in the last few months of how helpful it can be to add vocals onto your beat and using that as a way to decide whether you've underproduced or overproduced. Most commonly, our problem as beat makers is going to be that we overproduce and add too many sounds, too many complex patterns, and vocals will help you decide whether you need to, you need to simplify or change your arrangements or what have you. Mic is sounding good, maybe slightly loud versus normal. Not sure why that is. I think I do have my limiter on, but either way, hopefully it's bearable. Let me quickly do the audio test as usual, and we'll just get right into it, guys. Let's jump in here.
Where the hell are we?
Let me know if that sounded all right. Robbie is here. I haven't seen Rob in a while. Rob, I just beat Elden Ring yesterday, so I feel pretty accomplished. I'm the Elden Lord now. Yeah, so that was the assignment. As you guys hopefully know, the curriculum and everything has been updated in the course. I've been working on that update for months and months now. I think I started that process in like June or July. I feel good about the new curriculum and the idea that we can make a beat together in this new version. Rob, I submitted 30 seconds ago. Rob, you jerk. But since you're such a nice guy, I will include it in the list of wheel. Will the wheel choose you though? That is the real question. We don't know. Yeah, so that was the update to the curriculum. We also had 2 new packs, so a beat batter drum kit as well as Silver. He created a one-shot kit for the course and I added that. We have the new beat reconstructions, so you guys saw the announcement last week in the new channel on Discord, which is that either Karasama or Cora will be making a beat every 2 weeks, and then you guys sort of have a opportunity to practice how to recreate that beat. How many tries did it take to beat Melania? So I think Melania is the optional boss that I completely skipped. I had no idea. I just tried to go in blind, and it turns out I was looking at things up and I missed like 20% of the game. So I'm going to do my second run, and I've been told that Melania is the hardest boss, so I'll probably get whooped. Sounds good. So yeah, that was the update to the course. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Hopefully you guys are enjoying it. I know some of you guys are only partway through the course, and my recommendation is to start from the beginning again, just because everything, especially in the first 2 sections, I rehauled a lot. So it would be ideal to start from the beginning, and you can make the beat together, which is the big thing. Yeah, I think I also want to hear your guys' opinion on what you guys want more going forward. One of the ideas that I had, so as of right now with the beat making exercises in the new curriculum, we practice how to start a loop, how to sample, how to create some drum patterns. I think practicing, like putting in exercises for different like arrangements would be a good idea. That's the one big new video that I have in mind. There might be a new sound pack that gets added into the course in the next coming months. I'm not sure, but yeah, that is it. So much content is like impossible to find first playthrough. Yeah, I missed quite a bit. Molenia, I'm pretty sure I missed. That's a person who has like swords or something. That's a pretty vague description. Anyways, let's go ahead and spin this wheel. Let me know if you guys have any questions about the new course or anything you want me to clarify. But also want to mention that if you guys know of anyone who you think could really benefit from joining the course, keep in mind that there is the affiliate program, so you can just contact me. I can set you up to be an affiliate of the course, and at that point all you have to do is send that person a link that I provide you, and if they sign up you get 20% of the tuition that person pays. And you can just post this up on your social media if you want. You can send it to wherever you want, and yeah, you get 20% of the tuition if you get people to sign up. So if you do know someone who has been suffering from beatitis and you think a better Beatmaker is the cure that could help them, reach out to me, email me, and let me know if you want to be signed up as an affiliate, and we can set you up. Yeah, the Scarlet Rot. Yeah, I think I've seen videos of that, and it turns out I completely missed it. So I'll get that on the second playthrough. I also missed the sewers. I missed that, and I also missed like the underground volcano fire dungeon. Moha is on the wheel twice, trying to game the system. Moha, where is he? We got one Moha here. Oh, Moha. Did he submit twice? Is that why? Moha. Oh, have issues in first. This one is good. Well, he tried to warn me. I just didn't see it. Fair enough. All right, let's get to spinning, guys. Let's hear your beats with vocals on top. Start praying to the wheel now. Hopefully it blesses you, and you become the wheel lord, like I am the Elden Lord now. Oh, Uncle P. Uncle P is up first. That is a wild spin right there. Uncle P just submitted right before the stream, so we'll put Uncle P in a highlight. And please feel free to share your opinions on these beats, and let me know what things you could hear in terms of what can be improved and what you think is well done. Your guys' feedback is just as important as mine. Here we go, Uncle P.
That's how we playing. Niggas playing dirt. Niggas playing far. When I be on the west side, niggas know that I rotate with personal. In the streets, this what keeps to us, so don't take it personal. When them city slickers beating on your block, this shit is strictly business. EPMD, everybody plotting my demise. I marvel at the sight of Cain, I love to watch it rise. If this was love at first sight, then we was locking eyes. Got a fetish for them butter babies who love the ladies. ladies just as much as I do. Ain't gon' up if I ain't got to. Could've shot you, but you pussy. I ain't have to, but I took it. When I ride it, he like, Bodie, please don't kill me. Should've cooked it. I ain't run off with your work, bitch. I took, take that. Take a nigga brick, slap him, then you sell it back to them. You still in Brooklyn? This the proof in the pudding. Told my plug to leave me some room if it's any cushion. I'm the center of attention. Fresh out of Central Boulevard. My niggas wolves and she clothing, and all you niggas wolfing. Where we at?
All right, that was Core by Uncle P. A very grimy, gritty beat there. I love the creepy vibes, cool atmospheric elements. Sounds like a 50s crime noir soundtrack. I think that is a good observation. I think that might be where the sample came from, or like a 70s OST or something. Nice, this rocks, a lot of tension for sure. I like the idea, proper left field beat. Stone's Throw would love it. I like this beat a lot. Get Quasimodo on it. Yeah, so I think I agree with you guys. I really love the unique sounds and the awesome sample that was used. I think this is probably my favorite beat that I've heard from Uncle P. Very unique and very, like you guys said, very left field. And I really appreciate that. Interesting little techniques. So Red Octane says, I feel the vocal could be a little bit more upfront. Could be the sample itself having some effects on it. I think the vocal did fit the heavy tension. So yeah, you can hear the hi-hats have this cool, interesting flanging, or I think a phasing effect on it. Let me bring my book here. The beat had some work done in terms of the arrangement. We had that cool little drum stutter to break up the monotony, as well as that sort of short bridge in the middle there, which I definitely appreciate. And one of the things that I also think was well done was that different parts of the sample were used at different points, so it wasn't just a mere loop over and over again. Uncle P did a good job in finding different parts of the sample to sort of create a more dynamic beat. Rob says acapella came in kind of awkward to me, but it kind of shook out all right. John Sherby, how's it going? So I think I would also agree with what Red Octane says, which is the vocal performance did get drowned out by the beat. I think that might be a couple reasons. It could very well just be that the acapella that was downloaded just might be a little bit low quality. It sounded like some of the high frequencies were just not present with the vocals, so that just might be because the vocal ripper that was used might just not be as high quality, which there's nothing you can do about that. But I think what might be also a bit, I'll say what Rob mentioned, the acapella it came in at a little bit of a later time, so it seems like the beat starts again here. And we just have, I think that's Boldy James, we just have the ad-libs and the sort of introduction at this point. I think maybe pushing this forward so those ad-libs start during like this bridge area here, and having that talking happen here, and then right when the drums drop, that's when we get into the actual full verse. That could have been an idea that would have sort of talk to what Rob mentioned, but nonetheless, with the actual beat and the vocal getting drowned out, I think another problem might be just that the sample is just very, very wide and just takes up a lot of presence. And what you'll often find, at least for me, when I use this technique of figuring out how big my beat needs to be, you'll often find that this is something that I mentioned in the update of the course as well. With a lot of beats, most of the chorus sounds are probably going to sit in either the narrow or the medium stereo field. You don't often get very core important sounds in the more wide stereo presence, just because what ends up happening is this, where you have a lot of the sounds and textures just take up so much of the stereo presence, and just because vocal performances are often going to be a little bit more in the middle, the beat can easily start to overwhelm the vocal performance. So I sort of picked up on that during the verse section here. So especially with like the weird little horn sounds and the sort of, I think it's like a pad in the background of the sample, they're very wide and the vocal performance is very narrow, as it should be. So that might be another reason why. I think just merely taking a stereo shaper and maybe just shaving the sides of the beat as a whole and bringing it a little bit closer towards the middle, your beat won't sound as large, it won't sound as dominating. But again, if the idea is that we want to get a vocal performance to be the actual thing that people pay attention to, that's one of the things that you're going to have to sacrifice. The beat cannot be the star of the show to the degree that you might want it to be once we introduce vocals. So yeah, I think what Uncle P did here was really awesome. Like I mentioned, this is probably my favorite beat that he's made and submitted. Awesome, unique sounds and textures and samples. Cool vocal that was used here, definitely fits the aesthetic of the beat as well. I think just minimizing how much space the beat actually takes up in terms of the stereo presence. And I also do think that the vocal itself, the actual ripped a cappella, probably just wasn't high quality, but there's nothing you can do about that. I won't penalize Uncle P for that. But really great start there, a really cool beat that I enjoyed. Haven't listened to Cold Cuts yet, produced by Subject's new Wiki album. I have not. That did not come up on my release radar. I'm getting a lot of like dance music and electronic music on most of my Spotify suggested, just because I just haven't listened to much hip-hop recently. Is it worth checking out though? Let me know. In that time, let's spin a little. Let's get our spin on. We got Geisha up next. Let's listen to Geisha's tune here. Let's first highlight her and let's take a listen.
Colorado, smoke so much weed. I'm tired of being pushed around like a bully. I'm about to go crazy like Mick Foley. Blacked out in my scully head to toe. I don't wanna be chained at the door no more. Where the fuck is Lincoln at? I wanna be saved. I'm sick of being a fucking Walmart slave. Working minimum wage, living paycheck to paycheck. I'm stepping on these bitches' backs for neglecting my ability. I'm about to have you collecting disability. Yo, I'm sick of this store 2964. I'm about to swing this verbal sword right through your rib cage. I'm filled with rage. This mental pain got me losing hope. I just shove pills down my throat to sleep. Now I'm just they trying to kick me out. Put me on the bleachers, so fuck it. I'm punching you bitches in the mouth. I heard they trying to
right, that was Geisha's beat there. So we had a verse and then a hook section, and vocals were added onto both sections there. Great melodies, great harmonics. I really like those strings coming in for a little then hard cut out. That is a really cool technique. The beat has great space and sound selection. Yeah, I picked up on that as well. It sounds great. So yeah, this is one of the things that really jumped out to me as well. This is something that we talked about with Geisha's beat, I believe last time and a couple other times before, which is that Geisha often chose very long sustaining sounds that take up a lot of space in the beat. And this is one of the reasons why I sort of chose this sort of assignment in order to really point this out. Red Octane, I can't tell if the acapella during the verse was slightly different BPM and got a little off the snare, or if it was the artist's style. So yeah, I think with what Geisha did in terms of the composition with this beat is that you could hear a lot of more plucky sounds were used. So the main sound here was that, I believe it was like a guitar or maybe a sort of Asian plucked instrument. So instead of having these long, huge synths in order to build the core of the beat, Geisha chose to use something that's a little bit more transient, or far more transient, I should say. And this really helped create space for the beat, or sorry, for the vocal performance, which came in later on here. So by no means does the beat overwhelm or take up way too much room. I think this is a good, there's a good amount of balance here. And just as, whoopsies. Just as, who mentioned it there? The Red Octane says, I like those strings coming in for a little and then hard cut out. So I think that was a good technique in terms of just having that more sustained sound, which is the string, last for a very brief moment of time, just because if that ended up taking up a lot of the sort of verse, that probably would have started overwhelming the vocal performance, so we could hear that. I'm not sure exactly where it was, but when it started to come in, the vocal performance it started to get a little bit more pushed back into the secondary, but it having a hard cut and only lasting for like 2 bars, it didn't really hurt the beat at all. The interesting thing about this beat is that like the hi-hats were put in a sort of more backward space, which also helped add space for the vocal performance, just because the vocal performance here was very overall a little bit more high-pitched. The actual sort of vocals sat in a higher frequency presence compared to maybe other rappers. And so not having a very clean hi-hat that's very bright definitely helped create space for the vocal performance. So I think that was a very smart thing to do. And for the actual hook section, all that was used was a very basic phrasing. So it wasn't as if when the beat does sort of start to get bigger for the hook section here. Again, we have a lot more sustained sounds. This beat's a lot more full. You can even see this visually on the waveform. It just starts to hit the 0 decibel peak a lot more. But the vocal performance sort of takes that into account, and it doesn't have a very dense sort of hook. It's just a short phrasing repeated over and over again. So I think for the open space here that we just heard, maybe just repeating a phrase over and over again could be a cool idea. But nonetheless, the vocal performance becomes a lot more basic, and I think that's also smartly done. So I think Geisha did it very well here. What you guys are mentioning, the vocal performance seems slightly off. It felt slightly before, but I couldn't tell if that was a rap style also. Again, I think I'm not too worried about whether things are completely on time and whether you completely, absolutely like line up the vocals perfectly. My sort of more concern and things that I'm worried about, or things that I'm trying to pick up on, is whether the actual beat is constructed in a way that actually gives opportunity for a vocal to actually sit well in it. So I'm not too worried about whether it's a little slightly late or slightly early. Overall, I'm very happy with what decisions Geisha made for her beat here, which is to use less highly sustained sounds, more plucky sounds, and also think about the vocal performance in terms of which space it sits in and taking those sounds and maybe minimizing it, just because this is something that also I've mentioned in the new version of the course. One of the more common sounds that often gets in the way of vocals is a very, very bright piercing hi-hat. In a lot of the beats that sort of newer producers make, they have their hi-hats, you know, extremely loud, and they have insane amounts of like rolls and whatnot, especially for trap beats. And you'll often find that as soon as you add vocals on top, like that becomes a huge problem. And you'll notice that like your hi-hats should definitely be lower and a little bit more simple. So I'm interested to see if any of you guys submitted a trap beat, because that's probably something that you guys, as soon as you added vocals, it jumped out to you. But yeah, good job, Geisha, making great decisions there for this assignment. It really makes me happy that you guys understand how important it is to think about the shapes of the sounds that you use. That's a very important. Dimitri's up next, very important factor. Dimitri, well done. Let's see what Dimitri has for us with his beat. Here we go. Are there vocals in this beat?
Walk on the stubborn, fucked up some bread today. Though I said no, not this time. Cycles on circles, I get in front of me. High marinade on my mind. Stuck on the eye, no doubt I be high. I just make it through the night. Moonlight this rap today, feel like it's every night. Walk on the stubborn, fucked up some bread today. Though I said no, not this time. Cycles on circles, Like getting fed of me, high marinade on my mind. Stuck on the yard, know that I be alright. I can make it through the night.
All right, that was Dimitri's beat there, featuring a child rapping on it. That vocal performance is like pitched up or something. Oh, this is old Smino. Is that how this Smino character raps? Very high pitched. I like the dreamy vibe, great attention to detail, and very unique ear candy. The sample sounds familiar, like either from a movie or something that has used it, another tune. Maybe missing some frequencies in the mid, very heavy towards the high and low ends. Clean mix down with or without vocals. Since there's a lot of presence in the higher frequencies already, a lower pitched voice would have been more fitting maybe. That's definitely something that I wrote down too, Medea. Not what I was expecting, but I feel like it works. Was thinking the vocals may have filled the mid presence. Yeah, it's exactly. You guys are picking up on that. Literal da baby. No, it was pitched up. Yeah, I had the feeling. So yeah, I think with this beat, I like the detail, like you guys are mentioning. That weird chirping sound was a cool addition. This interesting like vocal percussion that was used. The drum pattern, it wasn't overly complex, especially with what I talked about in terms of the hi-hat pattern. No crazy rolls, nothing that went over the top. The 808 pattern was on point. I think that left a lot of good open space for a vocal performance. And I think that's what we heard once the vocals did come in. It did feel like, rhythmically speaking, it wasn't as if the beat and the vocal performance when they're sort of playing simultaneously together, there wasn't a sort of over complexity at all. I felt like it fit very well. And this is why, coming up with a more basic hi-hat pattern is often going to be helpful, because a lot of the times vocal performances are highly rhythmic, especially in rap music. And so I think that was very well done here. I also noticed that the times, so the core of the beat is a lot of more transient sounds, and when more sustained sounds do come in, like I think there was parts where we had a larger pad and a flute come in, Dimitri sort of minimized the other elements in his beat. In terms of getting rid of the drums at certain points and making sure there's a sort of balance that always played throughout the verse section. So even if you do introduce those more long sustained sounds, taking out other elements in order to create a little bit more of a balance, definitely a good idea. This was Al Pacino. So yeah, I think those are the good things. And I think what you guys are mentioning, it did feel as if the mid space was a little bit open, and I thought the vocal performance is going to be someone that has a more gravelly voice, that has something that's a little bit lower pitched, and so once that vocal performance came in, it would sit very well. But with the pitched up vocal, it sort of sat in a space that was already very full, with a sort of chirping sound and the sort of dreamier, higher pitched synths. A lot of the sounds already sat in that space, and so pitching up the vocal, I think, was probably not the best idea. I think this beat could have sounded like a complete song, just choosing a different vocal. In terms of the way everything was composed, I think everything was well done and well put together. So I think the only mistake that I would point out here is just choosing the wrong vocal to sort of do this assignment with. But in terms of the beat itself, I think Dimitri did a great job. One thing that I do want to say is that I almost felt like the beat, the POI in this beat was not too exceptional. I do like the idea of like the sort of dreamier, floatier beat, but in terms of the main sounds that were used, it felt a little bit lacking. I just would have liked some unique character to that sound, something that sounds a little bit different. This feels a little bit stock-ish to me. I know Dimitri's last beat that he submitted was really, really awesome, so I don't think that this is like a consistent problem by any means, but I just would have liked something with a little bit more character that stood out a little bit more. But nonetheless, that's just a personal preference thing. I think in terms of the actual composition of the beat and how everything was put together, Dimitri did a great job. So I'm really happy to see that you guys are, hopefully this has sort of illuminated some things in terms of how much to produce and how much to add into your beat, because it sounds like you guys are doing a great job in not overproducing so far. And hopefully the vocals and adding them into your beat was what helped you understand that. Smoke Break, yes, no controversy with that one. It almost jumped over to the next one, but it did not. So whoops, I was watching a Elden Ring video there before the stream started. Smoke Break, let's see what we got in store here.
Now I done told you about the birds and women. Now I'm gonna tell you about the birds and women. Give me $10 more, and I'll let your dick in my mouth.
That was Smoke Breaks beat. Very 90s there, which you guys were digging. Love the drums, great early 90s vibe, love the sounds. Waiting for Be Real to come in. I actually did think the same thing. I thought this was a very Cypress Hill-esque beat. but we had Public Enemy instead. Great, or solid 90s style in production. Yeah, the drums and old school wobble scratch are dope. A lot of energy in this one for sure. Perfect a cappella for the style of beat. I'm feeling this. This beat was fun, well done. Great vocals for this beat. Vocals isn't sitting quite right in time, but great in the mix. That bass line coming in was a nice little touch. So yeah, I think with Smoke Break's beat here, I found a lot of attention to detail in terms of the actual sample. He used different pieces and parts for different sections of the beat, and he also paid attention to different ways to add a little bit more variation to what Cora mentioned there, in terms of building a little bit of a different bass line, even with this sort of core melodic loop or the core sample loop playing, and then finding different chops and pieces for the actual sample itself, just to create variation. I think that was very well done, just because this is a 1 bar loop. It could have been very easy for this beat to start to sound repetitive, but I do think that Smoke Break went the extra mile to sort of push the arrangement so that didn't happen. In terms of the actual vocal and its setting in the beat, I did feel it fit well for the most part, but I do feel even when just the beat was playing in the very beginning, I thought the hi-hat might be a little bit of a problem. It was a little bit of a piercing quality at the very beginning, and it was a very bright hi-hat, and it was pretty loud. So I think if the hi-hat was brought down a little bit, and a little bit of EQing was done in terms of shaving off some of the high end, and I would take a transient processor and cut down the attack, I think the vocal would have sat a little bit better. So yeah, it's a ride, actually, I should say. So instead of it being a typical hi-hat that doesn't last a very long time, what was used here was a ride, and so by nature, rides are just a little bit more sustained compared to a typical short little hi-hat. This has it constantly playing throughout the entire beat. It's a very bright sound, and so because of those reasons, I think it became a little bit more dominant once the vocal performance came in. So yeah, the human ear tends to listen and focus on brighter sounds overall, and with Chuck D's voice here, very gravelly, very low, but I think the sort of hi-hat sitting on top of it, and I keep calling it a hi-hat, the sort of ride cymbal sitting on top of it, and it being as bright as it is, and it constantly playing just because it is a ride, it's sort of distracted a little bit. So my personal opinion, I think just reducing the brightness of it and maybe lowering it in volume, just tucking it away a little bit more, and maybe fill up that space by using an EQ on the vocal, I think that could have brought a little bit of a better balance. Nothing that's completely sort of destroying the song as a whole by any means. I think with the sample as well as the drum pattern, the vocals definitely sat in a good space in terms of there wasn't too much over complexity. The way it was composed, I definitely did focus on the vocals. I think just that one small little touch could help it sit a little bit better. So be careful with your high end. This is, like I mentioned before, this is something that I actually didn't even think of in terms of hi-hat versus like a ride cymbal in order to fill up the high end. Using more sustained long sounds like this is going to make it even more important to really control just how much is happening up there. So yeah, what I would recommend to Smoke Break is just reduce that ride, and you'll sort of probably end up getting a better balance overall. But yeah, awesome job with that sampled beat there. We still haven't really found any beats that are overproduced, which is really interesting. So you guys are doing a great job here. Unless, let's see what Xavier has for us. Last minute submission. Is it because Xavier wasn't happy with the beat? We'll see. Here we go.
remember Mr. Magic Flash, Grandmaster Gas, LL raising hell, but I didn't last and clear rock him was the shit to me. I flipped to see a Dougie Fresh show with Ricky D and Red Alert was putting in work. And Chuck Chill had my homies on the hill getting ill when shit was real. But I still remember raw with Daddy Kane when Daylight Show was putting pop holes in the game. I can't explain how it was. Houdini had me pumping on that Buddha getting buzz. Cause there I was with them block parties in the projects and on my block. And Dickie don't stop sipping on that private stock. Through my speaker, Queen Latifah and MC Light. Listen to Church KRS to get me through the night. With Tiller Rockin' Man, trying to step aside. And remember Pusha with the bomb shit. Nothing like the old school. Nothing like the old school. Nothing like the old school. Yeah. It ain't nothing like the old school. Nothing like the old school.
All right, that was Xavier's beat featuring Tupac.
The old school.
Very interesting combination there. Nice drums on the intro. Very cool sound selection. It all sounds like it's competing with itself volume-wise. Interesting. I like the idea for sure, but I feel a little too off time for some of the instruments. Interesting hearing Pac on something like this. It sounds nicer with the vocals on it, but still competes with Pac's raps. I don't think that horn fits with the other instruments either, in my opinion. I agree with John. So yeah, I think what I picked up on with this beat, when it's just the beat, I really enjoyed just how off-kilter some of the rhythms and the pockets of the beat were. We had this sort of back and forth with like the piano. We had that really unique bell sound. I just love how unique all the sounds were, and the way the low end was filled up was really, really interesting. You had this sort of this pad constantly playing, and you had a boomier, I think an 808 constantly playing, or it's not constantly playing, but playing intermittently, which was a really unique way to fill up the low end. And so I found the beat really, really liked how unique it was built. This is, again, I talked about this last time, it's something that I sort of really wanted to do, where this idea of like having sounds not play throughout the entire loop and just picking pockets, and I think Xavier did that really well here. But once the vocal did come in, the problems of the beat start to show a little bit more, which is, I think John mentioned it very well there. All the sounds like it all sounds like it's competing with itself volume wise, so everything was made very, very maximal. And I would also say, in terms of where the sounds sit, I think it was a little bit too forward. So I think the big culprit in this beat was probably that main bell sound. Not only was it very loud in terms of its volume, but it's pretty dry. So once you had the vocal, which is also meant to be very dry, it started to conflict a little bit. I think just taking the bell sound as well as that piano and literally, just like you guys mentioned, just making them a little bit more secondary, reducing the volume, maybe adding a little bit of reverb and pushing it a little bit further back. I think that could have easily created a little bit of a better balance. In terms of the actual rhythms and whatnot, I personally didn't really have a problem with the way, I know some of you guys mentioned that the sort of off-kiltered feeling of it was just a little bit off-putting. I think Cora mentioned like the idea, but I feel like it's a little bit too off time for some of the instruments. I sort of like that sort of sloppier, dragging feel, especially with the vocal performance. I really love the sort of piano stabs that we're playing alongside Pac's performance here. I think just the big problem is that it's just a little bit too upfront and up forward, and the vocal performance is sort of getting squeezed. So yeah, just merely making those sounds a little bit more secondary could have been the solution to that, and I don't think the problem at all has to do with an over-complex pattern per se. But yeah, I'm interested to see how this beat would have sounded with those sounds being a little bit more secondary. In terms of, I want to take a listen to the beat again. Yeah, so the hi-hats here in terms of the rhythm and the drums, nothing too overly complex. The bells and the piano, they have their own unique pocket, but it's not anything that's like overly complex. It's unique and it's particular, but it's not overly complex in my opinion. So I do feel as though it's just where those sounds were sitting, that was the main culprit. But yeah, it's always interesting to hear Xavier's beats. Very unique approach to his ideas, in terms of how he puts sounds and patterns together. I really love listening to Xavier's beats. All right, let's spin once again. Who's up next? Oh, we got Medea. Medea's beat is up next. Let's take a listen. Medea had that great Griselda beat last time, so let's see what you've got in store this time.
She just wanna dance and I just wanna party. Bottles of Hennessy, glasses of Bacardi. She just want a bad boy, I just want a Bobby. But that girl mine, she ain't leaving with nobody.
Any bottles got me slurring on my words, yeah. And I still charging my milli for a verse, yeah. Soon as we wrap up the session, I'm coming after the checking, cause I'm the type that would hit him where it hurts, yeah. Any bottles got me slurring on my words, yeah. And I still charging my milli for a verse, yeah. Soon as we wrap up the session, I'm coming after the checking, cause I'm the type that would hit him where it hurts, yeah.
She just wanna dance and I just wanna party. Bottles of Hennessy, glasses of Bacardi. She just want a bad boy, I just want a Bobby. But that girl mine, she ain't leaving with nobody.
Any bottles got me slurring on my words, yeah. And I still charging my milli for a verse, yeah. Soon as we wrap up the session, I'm coming after the checking, cause I'm the type that would hit him where it hurts, yeah. Any bottles got me slurring on my words, yeah. And I still charging my milli for a verse, yeah. Soon as we wrap up the session, I'm coming after the checking, cause I'm the type that would hit him where it hurts, yeah.
Alright, that was Looking for Something by Medea. Alright. I see you used CDK4. What is CDK4? I always love the dark, ominous feel of your beats. A nice switch up. Like the minimalist approach to this. The sound effects really fit the dark vibe of this beat. I feel the bridge could have used a synth bass playing throughout. That'd be an interesting idea. So with this beat, interesting rhythmic layer that was used. I really like that unique. Reading her description here, I still think she picked a good complementary vocal. I think the vocal fit well as well. I really like that unique layer for the rhythm. Where does it come in? So you can hear in the background, it's like this repeating short little sample. A very interesting way to fill up space plus add rhythm into your beat. I'm all for those types of small little sounds that really, it can go a long way in making your beat sound a lot more full, but do so in a little bit of a unique way. I like the sort of dark feeling of the beat as well, as Medea and all you guys mentioned. Very ominous. I don't think this beat was overproduced as well. I think there's a good amount of space in this beat. Non-BA is here. Hello, how's it going? I don't think this was overproduced by any means. I think for the hook, Medea did a good job of not just going overboard and just adding the additional sound, the extra layer into the beat. So I would say I think it could have been a little bit louder, so this is the sound I'm referring to. And I say that because during the vocal, it did not, it could have, I just feel like it could have been louder, and it would have helped make the hook sound a little bit more large.
Not my words, yeah. And I still charging my million for a verse, yeah. Soon as we wrap up the session, I'm coming after the check-in, 'cause I'm the type that would.
So as I mentioned, with your core main sounds, that are often going to sit in a little bit more of a narrow and medium stereo presence, but often for like sounds that come in during the hook, those are sounds that you can play around with space a little bit more. So I think with this, if Medea just, you know, did some panning from the far left and right and made that sound take up a little bit more room, I think that could have really helped make this area of the beat seem and feel a little bit more big and feel a little bit more like a hook. So don't be afraid to do those types of larger panning and making sounds take up more of the stereo presence if it's a more secondary sound that doesn't really show up for the entire beat, as this is a perfect example of that. If it's a sound that just shows up for the hook, this would be a great way to make your beat feel larger, because that's what hooks are supposed to do. And so one way of doing that is to just play with stereo presence. So I'm curious if you added a slight auto tune on the vocals. They seemed like they were a slightly different key. Maybe it was the difference in his voice between the two acapellas. Were there two acapellas in this? It really felt natural and like they fit together. So I think one other thing.
Hey boy, I just wanna Bobby, but that girl mine, she ain't even with nobody.
I think that main sound in here, that sort of weird off-kilter whistling, I think maybe just adding a tiny bit of reverb could have helped it sit in the beat a little bit better. I'm not 100% sure though. I would like to hear how that would have sounded, but that sort of felt a bit dry in my opinion. But those are the big things that jumped out to me. I think this was very, very well produced. And once again, you guys are doing a phenomenal job in making sure you don't overproduce. I think the choices in terms of the beat composition were very, very smart. Nothing insanely over the top. Really smart, unique ideas to fill up space. Like I mentioned, that rhythmic layer was really awesome. The bass pattern was interesting to hear Medea use something that's a little bit more trap-esque and do a good job of, you know, not being overboard with the 808 pattern and whatnot. Yeah, I think this is a well done, well put together beat. You guys are doing better than what I would have done, because I probably would have overproduced for sure. So you guys are doing awesome. Good catch. Those are two different acapellas, and I ran out of time, so I couldn't work on these anymore. I didn't even pick up on that. And you guys have good ears, because it sounded very fluid to me. Let's spin it up. Jinzu's up next. Jinzu, well done. Here we go. Let's listen to Jinzu's beat with a rap in the second verse.
Blind to the facts, thugs is convicts in God's prison. Hands on the strap, praying so Father, please forgive me. Police be rushing when they see me. I flaunt it, America's most wanted. Live on TV like pleasure and pain. Stuck in this game, holler my name. We all gon' die, we bleed through similar veins. Please explain to me now, don't panic when my guns burst. You heard the last jam, nigga, this one's worse. My nigga Bone held the throne till I came home. Thug love player, tell these bitch niggas bring it home. I caught a plane out to Cleveland late last evening to help my niggas clean up some niggas no longer breathing now. What do you believe in? Hit the weed, breathe. It's a cold ass world, niggas. Get you in your sleep, watch it until they stop me, brother, murder me or drop me. I got thug love for my nation, why I cross it, feel me?
That was Jinzu's beat there. I love the juxtaposition from the heavily distorted bass and the smooth instruments. Pac is a busy guy today. Damn, I feel this acapella works so well on this beat, hitting them feels. That's from Thug Love? Is that what the song's called? The one with Bone Thugs and Tupac. The beat has a great smooth vibe. Wish the vocals were cleaner. It did feel a little bit dirty. To better complement the production, I think the acapella could use a little bit more. I think the acapella could be a little bit more prominent, but could be the quality of the rip. I think it is a quality of the rip. It's definitely sounded like it. That was a dope beat, says Rob. So yeah, I really love the instrumentation in terms of this beat. I think everything sat in a great space. Everything had a little touch of reverb and a little bit of delay, and I think everything was sitting in a good spot. The low end sounded really cool. Everything worked on that front. What I do feel though is that there were a lot of additional rhythms added into this beat, and I think that did conflict a little bit. So what you guys heard was... So first off, we have that sort of bell that has a delay on it, which inherently isn't a bad thing, but I do feel as though... So with the small little percussion, like the hi-hat pattern, it's not an eighth note pattern, which isn't bad again. But with like the small little percussive sounds like those rims and that sort of stuttering, that repetitive side stick as well. Once the vocals got added in, I did feel as though those sounds and patterns ended up being a little bit more distracting rather than actually helpful. Like that sort of doesn't really help. It sort of detracts just because it's also very dry and very upfront, which, you know, that's what percussion sounds are going to sound like. And I sort of did feel as though if the vocals had been cleaner, I think it would have been an even bigger problem, just because it probably would have filled up a little bit more of the high end, and some of these extra percussive sounds probably would have conflicted even more. Yeah, the instrumentation sounds great. I think everything in terms of the actual sounds that were used with the instruments fits in a good space. I do just feel as though the rhythmic patterns were a little bit over complex and over the top. The vocals, again, what you guys are mentioning, I definitely agree with. It could have been a little bit more prominent, but that just might be the quality of the rip. So yeah, I think my takeaway is that the beat is slightly overproduced in terms of the additional rhythmic elements. I don't think they were necessary. If we removed all of those additional percussive sounds and those rolls, I think this beat still would have gotten its point across. And this is one of the big things that I always talk about in terms of what is good design. So if your beat still feels the same, it still evokes the same emotions, and it still creates the same imagery in the sort of listener, even if you remove certain elements, it's probably going to be a good idea to remove those elements then. So I feel as though if this beat didn't have those small percussive sounds and those rolls, like I think the reason why people, like even for me, why parts of this beat that I love are just like the smooth textures, the sounds that were used. I do actually like the delay on that bell, but once you add in those extra rhythmic sounds, it does go overboard. This cool little guitar lick that was playing there. I think those are the big important elements, and I think just keeping those would have been enough. So yeah, always think about good design. It's how can you get your point across in the least amount of steps. One of the things that Quincy Jones was, I think it's Quincy Jones, I'm not even sure, was famous for saying when he was producing on Thriller for Michael Jackson, was like, his thinking was, when is this song complete? It's not when you feel like you can add more, but when there's nothing left to take away. Try to make your beats oftentimes as bare as possible, as long as you can still get your point across and get your attention across. And if the beat still evokes the same feeling and the same idea, even if you don't have that small little texture in the beat, it's probably going to be a good idea to just remove it, which can feel like it's not our nature as producers, just because our job is to put sounds together in order to sort of create an idea or a feeling. And so removing sounds is almost like they say, killing your baby, but that's often going to be necessary if you want to pursue good design. Here we go with another spin. Is it going to be Rob? It is. Ooh, Robbie boy. He's thrilled right now. Coming in late. Taking up another hard-working producer's spot. I'm just joking. All right, Rob. Hopefully this is an Elden Rings type beat, so I can feel like an Elden Lord that I am. But let's take a listen. That was very short. All right, that was a minute-long beat. Elden Rings type beat is the next assignment. These sample chops are smooth to celebrate our newest Elden Lord. So yeah, with this beat, I really loved that is a Doom Dini acapella, I believe, automatic W. So yeah, I think with this beat, really awesome job with the actual sampling. I really loved this sort of, I think, I'm not even sure whose style this is very similar to, but it is this sort of fragmented yet it still sounds cohesive style where you have these intermittent like vocals coming in and out, and you have these great sounding chops. Vocals are not prominent enough, otherwise short and sweet. Yeah, I listen to mostly short beats. I think it all worked well together. It did start very abruptly though, hard for me to do long ones. So I think what you guys are mentioning, I would definitely agree with. The vocals did feel very quiet in this beat, and I think part of the reason why is similar to what we talked about before. The beat itself, this to me sounds like it might be even like a knowledge sort of direction where the beats are almost like a standalone thing where they are meant to sit up front. The chops remind me of Duckworth by Kendrick. The vocals are very quiet though. So yeah, this beat almost feels like it's supposed to be like a standalone thing that's meant to be enjoyed on its own. Because once vocals are added, it sort of feels like it consumes a bit too much space. For one reason, I think the stereo presence, once again, just like we mentioned before, very wide beat. We have a lot going on in the stereo presence, and so once the vocals do come in, like a lot of those details that we end up liking if it was a standalone beat end up being a little bit distracting, and I do feel the same way with a sort of small short vocal chops. Though they are very loud and prominent, they actually end up sounding louder than Doom's vocals in this beat as well. Like that chop there is pretty prominent. So I think, yeah, just rework. If you wanted to actually add vocals onto this beat, I don't inherently think the problem is with the beat at all. I think just merely stereo shaping, controlling the loudness of some of those chops, and just merely bringing up the vocals, I think this could have definitely fit in well, just because it's pretty much just the way the beat is actually composed in terms of, do you want it to be a standalone thing or do you want to add vocals on top, because your production decision is going to be a little bit different either way. Yeah, I don't think the drums by any means are going to be overwhelming. They really have that sort of Mad Lib feel where they integrate into the sample very well. It didn't really jump out to me that there's an overwhelming high end, which is going to be a very common problem. So I think Rob did a good job in choosing good samples, creating a really cool, unique sounding beat in terms of how the chops were put together. The drum work in here is phenomenal. I really love that style where it feels like it sits in the beat and it almost sounds like a part of the sample. It's just merely de-emphasization of the beat itself and re-emphasizing the vocal performance just by some easy stereo presence rebalancing and some volume control. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Really cool beat though, Rob. Rob's made some very large strides. I remember the initial beats that he was submitting. It felt like a very amateurish boom bap beat when he used to submit, but I feel like these beats, especially with this beat now, this feels like almost like a veteran performance in terms of like how Knowledge or Madlib would put their beats together. This feels like, if you put a Madlib beat right next to this one, I feel like there wouldn't be much difference in terms of like what is the quality difference between these two. I think this is a really awesomely put together beat. Awesome. I really enjoyed that. Let's spin it up. The Sherb man himself, John Sherb. He's gonna hit us with the Sherb stick. Where are you, Sherb? Why can't I see it? There he is. Let's take a listen to Sherb.
songs. I was like humming tunes 10 years later, writing in my room. 10 years after that on stage, like it's too soon. But for me, see, my parents met inside a nightclub. Olu started to fight, and then my mom's broke it up. She said, this boy, he's in the Navy. Settle down before y'all need saving. Pop went to war around the world, came home, he celebrated AWOL. Fast forward to when I started to play ball. From a place where we hit laws, see the Jakes and we take off. Whoop, whoop. Hit the gate, I get home and take my chain off. Thankful I got through the day and all the evil I prayed off. Everything is cause and effect. Make the wrong moves in this business, you lose all your respect. My block is dark as it gets. We all make mistakes, only few will recover from them. Don't spend your whole life running from them. Run up the numbers. Should've told them I'm raising up on the totem. Yeah, rolling over, pot full of Yola. Mix it up with the cola. Son of a queen and a soldier, can't let them fuck me over. Gotta keep my composure, look.
Interesting beat. That Nas acapella fit perfectly. That's interesting. I was gonna say something, but right when the vocals came in, I feel it filled those spaces and all worked. I was actually gonna do the exact same thing. So my initial feeling was when the beat first started, I felt as though there was a little bit of missing brightness. I felt as though the beat itself, maybe like a little bit of brightness could have been added to the snare, or maybe a tiny bit to the hi-hat. But I feel as though once the vocal came in, I mean, Nas has a very higher pitched, very bright vocal. And so once it came in, the song sounded completely full. Yeah, the sample selection was awesome. I love the way you created those chops. You didn't make a very monotonous, repetitive loop. I think this is awesomely well done, put together beat and song, I should say. So you guys are mentioning that the drums are stereo, kind of throwing you guys off. I didn't even pick up on that. Are they? So there's a stereo effect at this part, but are the main drums like that too? I don't know, they sound like they only during small sections of the vocal it was great. Yeah, so I think Sherb did a killer job here. I was gonna get ready to criticize the beat, but he took my words and shoved them back into my mouth. At the end of the vocals you can hear it. So yeah, I think this was a well put together beat, really awesome. I'd love to like share this on my YouTube community and see what they say as well, because that's a very great example of like a before and after of like how easy it can be to think that, oh, this is missing some spaces and it doesn't feel full, and yet right when you add the vocals, I guess it depends solely on like the actual artist itself. The beat song can sound completely full. Funny enough, I almost gave up on the beat until I found the right vocal, then it all came together. Yeah, I do think Nas's vocal properties is what definitely helped here. He's a lot of crispness in the high end, definitely does feel a lot more full. I do feel as though if this was given to like another artist who was not as high crispy in terms of their vocals, I think just merely like bring up a tiny bit of brightness on the snare and the hi-hat could have definitely had and maybe a little bit of the sample could have made the beat feel like it could have fit another artist as well. But yeah, this is an awesome beat. That was interesting even for me, because if I was at this stage of the beat making process, fucking Google Drive thing, I would have felt like the beat was probably incomplete, but once you add vocals, interesting. All right, Jay Sherb crushed it with that one. Let's go back to the wheel. Who's up next? Is it Moha? It is Moha. We haven't had any controversial spins this time. I feel like it's either all spins that are completely like right in the middle, or we get every single spin being a nail biter. I like the nail biters personally. Okay, so let's listen to Moha's tune here.
En me disant j'ai jamais demandé à t'avoir. C'est avec ces formules trop saoulées, enfin faut croire que mon père a contribué à me lier avec la rue. J'ai eu l'illusion de trouver mieux, j'ai vu ce qu'un gamin de 14 ans avec le décalage de l'âge peut entrevoir. C'était comme un mirage, plus d'interdit, juste avoir les dents assez longues pour croquer la vie, profiter de tout ce qui tombe. La rue a su me prendre car elle me faisait confiance. Jusqu'ici avec mon père était comme de la nuisance. Aucun d'entre nous n'a voulu recoller les morceaux. Toute tentative nous montrait qu'on avait vraiment trop d'ego. Mon père n'était pas chanteur, il aimait les sales rengaines, surtout celles qui vous tapent comme un grand coup de surin en pleine poitrine. Croyant la jouer fine, il ne voulait pas, ne cherchait même pas.
We got French rapping. All right. Whoops. What am I doing? Where am I? Who am I? The lady in the picture kind of freaking me out. I was trying to look at which lady. Oh, this one right down here. That is kind of scary. I like the perk coming in every once in a while. That delay is a bit jarring, says John. I feel the snare could come up in volume a little. We'll see with the vocal though. The flute kind of throws me off a bit. Perfect with the vocal. Vocals fit perfectly. I do think that the string synth sounds maybe a bit too loud with the vocal. French can sound so aggressive. I've heard a few French songs in terms of the rap, and yeah, it definitely does feel very aggressive. Her face doesn't look real. So yeah, I think this is the core of the beat is very well produced. I love the sample. I'm not sure where Moha got this from, but I really love. I want to start working with orchestral samples like this because they can make your beat sound so much more unique. I haven't sampled in a long time. I feel like I've been working on trying to get my making my beats from scratch skills up, and I feel like I miss sampling, so I definitely want to do a little bit more of it. I think with the core of the beat, the way these other sounds were built was definitely on point. So for example, we have the sample itself is a very sustained sound. It's a string sample and it has I think multiple layers to it. So we have this very dense string sample, and I think the way the drums are programmed around it were very smart. We don't have a ton of additional percussive sounds and nothing that's like really driving the rhythm of the beat outside of it. We just have, we have a very, very, very subdued hi-hat, and we have a kick and a snare. I think this part of the beat was very well done. I do think that some of those small additional sounds that eventually do come in, like those parts, I do feel it becomes a tiny bit distracting. And with the, I think it was like, it's probably a gross beat or something, we do lose some of the sort of core of the beat. I do think this is probably because Moha wanted to figure out how to make the beat feel a little bit more unique and, you know, put a little bit more effort into the arrangement. I would have liked to hear maybe taking a different part of the sample and creating something around it. That would have been nice. Something that sort of jumped out to me, I'm curious to get your guys' opinion. I like how with the bass, we do have that long sort of, that initial thump, but we also have that subby bass line that goes alongside the string. Something about it just doesn't feel right to me. That subby bass line that goes up and down, I think maybe just simplifying it so it just maybe plays a more simple pattern of just like maybe 2 notes as opposed to moving alongside the string sample. I think that might have felt a little bit better. It just might be me, but something about that pattern, it might be the note itself, it just maybe the wrong note. That note right there, I'm not 100% sure, it just sticks out to me. Nonetheless, I do love when the vocals come in. Again, great example here of like, you don't need your hi-hats to be crazy, you don't need to make over-the-top crazy patterns, because once the vocals come in, it sounds complete, it sounds full. So Red Octane says maybe they're playing different notes so it threw off the low end. That could be it. Maybe it's like the resonant tail of that big thumpy, the big booming bass added with the sub-ear bass that's playing different notes. It might be that they're conflicting. I'm not 100% sure. Something about the low end is a little bit wobbly and strange to me, but nonetheless, my big thing was whether you guys overproduce or not. I think this is a great example of not overproducing. I do love the core idea here, and once the vocals are added on top, it sort of goes to show that your beats don't need to be completely over the top and full. During the parts where those additional effects come in though, okay, so that part wasn't used for the actual vocal. I would imagine it might end up being a little bit overwhelming. Alright, nonetheless, Moha did a great job here. I'm very, very impressed with what you guys are doing here. I'm hoping that forcing you guys to use vocals on your samples has really helped you understand just how what the good amount of balance is for when you make beats, and ideally you want to work with artists. That's when this would be very, very helpful and important. So yeah, let's spin it up. Let's do 3 more spins, and whoever doesn't get their beats heard, you will get a review coming into your email in the following weeks. Bobby Lasers is up next. So yeah, this is another thing that we're doing, obviously. Even if you don't get your beat reviewed during the stream, you will get your beat reviewed in email form coming up. So that's Bobby Lasers. Let's take a listen to Bobby's beat. Do you guys remember watching Bobby's World? Are you guys old like me? No? You know what? We'll rewind just because my mic was on. I didn't realize. My apologies. So let's rewind a bit, and so you guys can get a better sense of how this beat sounds with and without the vocals.
Walk through my heaven with levitation from restrictions, events and E7 showboating with Rugas, Flash Vines, Belafonte Jigger. Let's keep forward this work as we confiscate your figures.
Casanova Brown, levitating GE and Dashikis, a la hot car, 54, chasing diamond runners, headed ice bear. The big killer diamond convention, Harlem Bucks track, using world heights, Hollywood, Madam Butterfly. Let me in your house, a pleasure. From the knuckle swat, shadow boxes catching black eye.
I play the deep, what? Sensations at the Marchi Bar, we screaming Chiba. Fulfilling pleasures in my castle, blow the smoke out. Bigger substitutes when the Dutch is gone. The low don't stop. Give me shouts as the seasons are tears. Two flavors for swerving no corners. We madness to moolah. Living with Charlie's angels on this. No smiling when sliding. That gets you caught up in the octa or dead if we're moving. It's just like that as we proceed.
Saturday night special, better take it light. You Jaja, you're a Capitan. Quest to the coast, the Key Largo, wire the chain gang. Keep your ears out for a ear. Sip the fountain blue. House of bamboo paradise.
This is it. What? You genie pouring from the sky. Let's be rich. What? The genie wants to sugar down. Can't quit. What? Now pop the cork and steam the finger and get lit. What? This is it. What? This is it. What? You genie pouring from the sky. Let's be rich. What? The genie wants to sugar down. Can't quit. What? Now pop the cork and steam the finger and get lit. What? 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 And get lit.
Alright, that was Camp Low and Bobby Lasers. A big fan of dinosaurs, it seems. Cool groove going on, pretty wild with the echo. That was me. The vocals are great on this. Hits hard too. I love Lucchini. I love the kick. Rebuilt the drums at the 11th hour. Are my headphones broken? The kick and the snare feel stereo as well, blurring the vocals. So yeah, I think that's what jumped out to me as well. It sounded like the kick and the snare were panned and tilted pretty heavily towards one side. We also had, so overall what I picked up on is there's a lot of stereo tilt with the drums, which already is something that not commonly done with hip hop, just because with hip hop drums are meant to be very, very central. The pattern, the drum pattern itself was quite dense. We had a lot of snares and kicks, not to mention we also had an additional percussion loop. And so my thinking is that the vocal performance, once you added the vocals on top, the beat might have ended up sounding very, very full and like way too much happening if everything was positioned correctly. So if the drums were put in the middle and you had that percussion loop as well, plus the highly rhythmic vocal performance, you might have heard that like it just sounds like there's way too much going on, and that might be the reason why you decided to like tilt the drums to one side, because that freed up space. But nonetheless, I don't think that's the approach that you'd want to take. If that is the case, that it felt like there's way too much going on, you probably should have simplified the amount of percussion the amount of rhythm in your beat. So again, it's something I talk about in the course. You probably want to approach your beat in a way where you have a good balance of rhythm, where you have certain sounds that are highly rhythmic, certain patterns that are a little bit more basic. And it sounded like with this beat, I definitely do think you did a good idea with the sample in terms of just using short stabs, but I'm curious to hear what was the reason why you did such a hard pan with the drums, because if it was for the sake of the kick and the snare shouldn't be panned, says Bobby. Oh, okay. So I'm not sure exactly why it happened, but if it was a complete mistake. I would have liked to hear how the beat would have sounded if they were more in the middle. So yeah, I think I do actually, one thing I want to point out, I actually really love the hook of this beat. When you actually played the full sample and you had it as a loop and you used like the hook from the actual song as well, I think those matched up really well. So I think that's like around here. So I enjoyed that part. I really love the attention to the arrangement and your idea for sort of having that full phrase from the sample play during the hook and then using short little stabs during the verse. Really cool idea. I think it's just the big thing is the drums. I actually think I like my echoed version more. I didn't feel that they were panned, but more stereo separation, not centered. I only pan my hi-hats or rides. So yeah, it just might be my own monitoring station here, but for some reason it sounded like it was panned to the left. But yeah, nonetheless, I would have liked the drums to be a little bit more central, and if it ends up being a little bit more overwhelming with the amount of rhythm, at that point you'd probably have to minimize, but again, that's an if that actually happens. Bobby, we've got a lot of boom bappery in this one. There's not many trap submissions. I wonder why that is. Okay, let's go back to the wheel. Bring us Deleg. There's no controversy. What's the wheel doing? I miss the days when the wheel was full of controversial spins. Like Medea said, only the first spin was exciting. Deleg. I think Deleg usually likes to go for trap-esque beats, so let's see what Deleg has in store for us here. 184. Uh-oh. That was Deleg's beat there. Majin. I believe that is a Dragon Ball Z character. I don't know. We need some nail biters. I agree. More boom babbery, less trap dashery, says John Sherby. I don't know what that means. Trap dashery. I hope mine gets chosen, not trap but boom bap. Red Octane, delving into the world of boom bap. Interesting. Makes a change to have less trap. Next assignment, no boom bap allowed. No boom bap Elden Ring type beat. That is what we're gonna do. Bobby, thanks for coming. See you later. Something seems off about the vocal, but couldn't tell. Maybe needs some heavy de-essing. Maybe mixed with the hi-hat. There seems to be a lot of sibilance? I'm not even sure what that means. Red Octane's got knowledge I don't have. It sounded like the vocal had reverb on it, and I think that's the reason why it sounded strange to me. That was not my mic on when I played it, by the way. Yeah, it's sort of pushed back in terms of a reverb added onto it. So with this beat, I really liked how simplified and how everything sat in terms of the beat. Deleg, I think this is probably my favorite beat that Deleg's made. I liked the technique that he used here of just the drum pattern was very simple, no additional useless sort of sounds that were added in. The hi-hats were a little bit more complex, but that was like the only highly rhythmic texture, so that was fine because you know the actual core sound that was used wasn't really rhythmic at all. The hi-hat also had a little bit of attention paid to it, which was that it had some reverb put onto it. It wasn't necessarily extremely bright and upfront. So I think that was really well done. Great 808 pattern as well. Nothing over the top and insane with crazy slides or anything. I think that's part of the reason why the vocals. Well, I think the reason why that was done was because there was a vocal performance added. I would have liked to hear how this beat would have sounded without that reverb. I'm not 100% sure why that reverb was added. And something else that jumped out to me was that once the beat gets pitched up, Deleg decided not to have the vocals continue to play during that part. So I wonder if there was like a little bit of struggle in terms of getting the vocal to sit and sound good. And it might be because the pitch of the actual, the frequency space that the vocals take up. Yeah, I wish Deleg was here so he could explain himself in front of the jury. Because yeah, I can't think of why so much reverb was added onto this vocal.
Keep a weapon, patting down for wires, niggas ask too many questions. I get sloppy top, on spot, bitches messy.
So I think what it might be is that main sound, it has quite a bit of presence and does sound pretty heavy in the low mid. Like it sounds like there's an additional layer of strings down there perhaps, and so, but the vocal itself is like a little bit high pitched. Maybe it just sounded way too overwhelming. Once the vocals were added, it could be possible that it just sounded like there's a way too much happening, and so he added that reverb. Whereas it might be a better idea to just shave a little bit of frequency out of that sound just so there wasn't as much sort of emphasis put on how loud that sound is. I'm not 100% sure, I'm just sort of speculating here. Finally submits on time then leaves. So yeah, I would have liked to get an explanation just because it's hard to sort of figure out why that was done. And I also would have liked to see if the vocal would have actually sounded balanced during this part of the beat as well, just because when you pitch up the main core sound of your beat, it could end up leading to some problems with getting the vocals to sound balanced. So yeah, this beat, I do like the composition, I do like the way it's put together. I think it was simple enough to invite vocals on top in terms of these decisions to, you know, make sure nothing's overly complex, but it's for whatever reason the actual vocals that were added on top sat in a strange place, and I'm not sure why that decision was made. Deleg, I wish you didn't run away. Alright, let's do one more spin, and then whoever doesn't get their beat chosen here, once again, you will get your beat reviewed. I should really start saying that at the very beginning of the thing. So yeah, let's do our last spin here. Who's it gonna be? D-Money. It is D-Money whose beat we're gonna be listening to. Whoops, I muted myself there. I want to say again, thank you guys for showing up. Hopefully this challenge has been very illuminating and helps you understand how much to produce and the line that it can easily be crossed when you overproduce. So let's jump right into D Money's beat. Here we go. Vince Staples is on this one.
Now on I done came a long way. If I had I free up all this. If she out while we slide, go up in the house, cut it, get violent. Better keep your mouth shut if we hear sirens. I'ma be on death row just like Suge Knight now. I stand 10 toes, I'm not no buster. Seen him by the wind cold, worked on my jumper. Baby know I'm hotter than the city in the summer. Before I leave the house, I gotta tell her that I love her. I don't know if I'ma make it home. These gang banging, they just singing songs. I done seen it all, bloodshot eyes broke my heart. Then instead that I'm still outside. Took a loss, took a risk, now I'm back in the mix. Watch who you keeping around when you rich. Money ain't make me, still thugging till the feds come take me. Mean money, foot up on the gas, 100 on the dash. Lower in the stats, 30 in the math. Hung on Cherry Ave, I ain't go to class. They don't say what's up, cause they know it's that. In too deep, I ain't with the peace. When they in the beef, tell them bring my homies back. Free the killer, he was on attack. Yeah, you wanna know my zodiac. Every time I fall in love, baby, do me bad. Giving up when I went and gave it all I had. I will never chase a cab, rather chase a bag. Have fun, life short when you living fast. I'm a in the set, baby, going ass. Never go outside, get up on my last. If I die today, they gon' go and crash. That's on Tiny Scrap, that's on Lil Head. Ay. Trophy in the hood, ayy. Bullshit, wood, ayy. Got my weight up. Now I'm feeling good, ayy. Now I'm on, ayy. I done came a long way. If I had one way, I free the homeless.
All right, that was D Money with Vince Staples. A very West Coast beat there. I liked it. So I think I wish it wasn't censored. Great production though. The tambourine clashes a bit with the vocals, it seems. Also hearing a few harsh frequencies here and there, but overall I really like the beat. Vocals fit well. So I think D Money did some good. Did a good job of I think choosing good drums. A very minimal, subdued side stick instead of a full on snare. I think the basicness of the drum pattern worked well. I liked the instruments that were chosen. I do agree that there were some conflicting. The vocals did seem to have some ducking at some points. Also felt like a random side chain. Interesting. I didn't pick up on side chaining, but I do agree that there were points where it did feel as though the vocals did get a little bit drowned out at certain parts when the more sustained sounds came in. So there were parts of this beat where it was just very, very transient sounds.
Make me still thugging till the feds come take me. Mean money.
So that has a good balance, but once the synth comes in,
foot up on the gas, 100 on the dash. Lower in the stats, 30 in the math. Hung on Cherry Ave, I ain't go to class. They don't say what's up, cause they know it's that.
The vocals do start to get a little bit pushed back in terms of being a little bit more secondary. So I don't necessarily think the problems were the sounds themselves. I just do think that if those sounds were constricted in terms of how much space they took up, you didn't make them as prominent just because you have the original chorus sounds that were just playing during the more balanced part, and then you have this new added layer. It did end up getting a little bit too overwhelming. So I do think to Medea's point in terms of hearing harsh frequencies here and there, maybe just minimizing how much of those sounds take up in terms of the frequencies, doing some EQing and just keeping the sort of primary frequency zones could be a good idea. But yeah, overall, I do think you guys have done such a good job in terms of not overproducing. Makes me happy to see. Hopefully this has been a very illuminating exercise, and for whoever did not get their beat reviewed during this stream, you will get your beat reviewed in the coming weeks. Thank you again, guys, for joining up and watching the stream. Again, feel free to join the affiliate program if you guys know anyone who could benefit from joining Better Beatmaker, and you guys can get 20% of their tuition. And I agree, Medea, I very much enjoyed the stream as well. And we will come together again in 2 weeks, but next week is going to be the answer to the latest beat reconstruction, and then Cora will post up his beat for the following 2 weeks after that. Anyways, happy to have you guys here, and enjoy your Sunday. Bye bye.